Captain Jake Miller watched the red warning lights flash across his control panel as his ship, the Endurance, screamed through the alien atmosphere. The hull groaned under pressure as he fought to keep the vessel steady. 3 days ago, his exploration mission had gone wrong when hostile aliens attacked his ship near the edge of known space. "Come on, hold together," Jake muttered, his hands gripping the controls. The ship's eye, Aria, spoke in her calm voice even as everything fell apart around them. "Captain, we have lost main engines. Landing thrusters at 40%. I suggest finding a landing zone quickly." Through the viewport, Jake saw a harsh world of red rock and deep valleys. Mountains stretched across the horizon like broken teeth. The planet looked dead, but his scanners showed breathable air and water sources. It would have to do. The ship hit the ground hard. Metal screamed against stone as the Endurance slid across the rocky surface, leaving a trail of sparks and debris. When everything finally stopped, Jake found himself hanging upside down in his harness, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. "Aria, damage report," he called out. "Multiple hull breaches. Life support operating at minimum levels. Main computer. Core intact, but running on backup power. Captain, I must inform you of something important about our mission." Jake pulled himself free and dropped to what was now the ceiling. His body ached, but nothing felt broken. "What about the mission?" "The sealed orders you were given contain information beyond exploration. Humanity's survival depends on what we carry in the cargo hold." Before Jake could ask more questions, his proximity alarms began to sound. Through the cracked viewport, he saw shapes moving in the distance. The aliens who had attacked him had followed his ship down to the surface. "How long before they reach us?" Jake asked, grabbing his emergency pack and weapon. "Approximately 2 hours, Captain. However, my scans show a large canyon system 15 kilometers north. The rock formations would provide excellent cover." Jake looked at the twisted wreckage of his ship. He could not repair it, and staying here meant certain death or capture. The aliens had technology far beyond human understanding, but they had one weakness: they seemed to avoid certain types of terrain. "What about the cargo? Can I carry it?" "Negative, Captain. The cargo container weighs 300 kilograms and contains delicate equipment. However, there is another option." Aria explained that she could transfer herself and all critical mission data into a portable drive. The main cargo could not be moved, but the most important part of their mission could survive in a device small enough to carry. Jake began gathering supplies: water recyclers, food rations, basic tools, and medical supplies. His training had prepared him for survival situations, but not like this. He was alone on an alien world with enemies hunting him. As he worked, Aria continued to explain their true mission. "Captain, humanity did not send us just to explore. We carry the genetic codes and technological blueprints needed to establish human colonies beyond Earth. If something happens to our home world, you carry the future of our species." The weight of responsibility hit Jake harder than the crash had. He was not just trying to survive. He was protecting humanity's backup plan. Every choice he made now could determine whether humans continued to exist among the stars. Outside, the alien shapes were getting closer. Jake could see their tall, gray forms moving across the rocky landscape with disturbing grace. Their weapons glowed with blue energy that had torn through his ship's shields like paper. "Time to go," Jake sighed, shouldering his pack. He slipped the data drive containing Aria into a secure pocket. The canyon system offered his best chance of survival, but it meant crossing 15 kilometers of open ground while being hunted by creatures that wanted him dead. Jake took one last look at the Endurance. The ship had been his home for 2 years of deep space travel. Now it was a tomb of twisted metal and broken dreams. But somewhere in that wreckage lay the tools and knowledge needed to seed new worlds with human life. Arya, if I don't make it, you will make it, Captain. Humans have a remarkable ability to survive against impossible odds. Your species did not reach the stars by giving up easily. Jake stepped out into the alien air. The atmosphere felt thin but breathable. 2 suns hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the rocky ground. Behind him, smoke rose from his crashed ship. Ahead lay the canyon that might save his life. The hunt was about to begin. Jake ran across the broken landscape, his boots crunching on loose rocks. Behind him, the alien hunters moved like deadly shadows. He could hear their strange clicking sounds echoing off the canyon walls as they communicated with each other. The creatures were called Vex by the few humans who had encountered them before. They stood 8 feet tall with long limbs and gray skin that seemed to shift color with their surroundings. Their weapons could cut through steel, but they had never faced a human in a real hunt. Captain, your heart rate is elevated. Remember to pace yourself. Arya's voice came from the small device in his pocket. She could still monitor his vital signs through his suit's sensors. Jake ducked behind a large boulder as blue energy blasts scorched the rock above his head. The Vex were fast, but they moved in straight lines. Humans had learned to think in curves and angles, using terrain that other species ignored. He pulled out his sidearm and checked the power cell. Enough for maybe 20 shots, but he needed to make each one count. Human weapons were primitive compared to Vex technology, but they still worked. A shadow moved to his left. Jake spun and fired, the plasma bolt catching the Vex in the shoulder. The creature stumbled, but did not fall. Instead, it made a sound like breaking glass and kept coming. They're tough, Jake muttered, rolling behind another rock as more energy beams lit up the air around him. Arya, how far to the canyon? 8 kilometers, Captain. However, I am detecting something unusual about the Vex pursuit pattern. They seem to be driving you toward a specific location rather than trying to kill you immediately. Jake paused. That made sense. If they had wanted him dead, they could have destroyed his ship completely during the space battle. They wanted something from him, which meant he had value alive. The knowledge made him more dangerous, not less. If they needed him breathing, he could take bigger risks. Jake spotted a narrow ravine cutting between 2 cliff faces. The gap was barely wide enough for a human, but the tall Vex would have trouble following. He sprinted toward it as energy blasts turned the ground into glass behind him. He squeezed into the crack just as a Vex reached the entrance. The creature's long arms stretched into the gap, claws scraping against stone inches from Jake's face. He grabbed the alien's wrist and twisted hard. The Vex screamed, a sound like metal tearing. Jake used his leverage to slam the creature's arm against the rock wall until bones snapped. The alien pulled back, making that glass-breaking sound of pain. Humans are the only species that fights dirty, Arya observed as Jake moved deeper into the ravine. Most alien cultures have rules about combat, honor codes. You simply fight to win. That's because we're the only species that had to fight. Our way to the top of our own food chain, Jake replied, pushing through the narrow passage. Every other intelligent race we've met evolved from prey animals or pack hunters. Humans evolved from persistence hunters. We don't give up. The ravine opened into a wider valley filled with strange crystal formations. Jake's scanner showed the crystals contained metals unknown to human science. This whole planet was a treasure trove of resources, which probably explained why the Vex wanted to control it. Movement caught his eye. 3 Vex had found another way into the valley and were positioning themselves to cut off his escape. Jake looked up at the crystal spires rising around him. Crazy idea, but it might work. He holstered his weapon and began climbing one of the larger formations. The crystal surface was smooth, but not slippery. His gloves found purchase on tiny ledges and cracks that the Vex's longer limbs could not use effectively. From 30 feet up, Jake could see the Vex spreading out below him. They made clicking sounds of frustration. Their weapons could reach him, but destroying the crystals might cause a cave-in that would trap them all. Jake pulled out his gun and aimed carefully at the base of a crystal formation near the valley's entrance. One shot. The crystal shattered in a cascade of falling stone and metal, blocking the path behind the Vex. Now they were trapped with him. "Captain, your tactics are highly unconventional," Arya said. "Welcome to humanity's greatest strength," Jake replied, beginning to climb toward the valley's far end. "We don't play by anyone else's rules." Jake reached the canyon just as the second sun began to set. The massive gorge stretched for miles in both directions, its walls dropping into darkness below. Ancient water had carved the stone into strange shapes that looked like frozen waves. His Vex pursuers had fallen behind after the Crystal Valley incident. Jake had used the terrain to his advantage, leading them through narrow passages and unstable rock formations. 2 of the aliens had been injured when Jake triggered a small landslide. The third had given up the direct chase and was probably calling for reinforcements. "Arya, scan the canyon. Is there a way down?" The AI's voice crackled from the device. "I detect several paths carved into the rock face. Captain, these appear to be artificial. Someone built them." Jake studied the canyon walls through his binoculars. Arya was right. The paths were too regular to be natural, worn smooth by countless footsteps. But who had made them? His sensors showed no current life signs in the immediate area. As he prepared to descend, Jake noticed something else. Metal glinted in the fading light from somewhere deep in the canyon. A structure of some kind, partially hidden by overhanging rock. "Arya, are you picking up any energy signatures down there?" "Negative. On active power sources. However, I am detecting refined metals consistent with spacecraft construction. Captain, there may be another crashed ship in the canyon." Jake began his descent carefully. The ancient path was solid but narrow, with no room for mistakes. One slip would mean a fall of several hundred feet. As he climbed down, he thought about the implications of finding another ship. If it was human, there might be survivors or useful supplies. If it was alien, it could be a trap or contain hostile technology. Either way, he needed to investigate. The Vex interest in this planet had to come from somewhere. 20 minutes later, Jake reached a wide ledge that offered his first clear view of the structure below. His breath caught in his throat. It was definitely a ship, but unlike anything in human or Vex databases. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times larger than the Endurance. Its hull was made from a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Arya, can you translate those markings?" "Negative. The symbols do not match any known language in my databases." "Captain, this ship is very old. My scans suggest it has been here for at least 10,000 years. Jake continued his descent, his mind racing. A 10,000-year-old alien ship would be an incredible discovery under normal circumstances. But right now, it might be his only hope of survival. The canyon floor was covered in fine sand that muffled his footsteps. Jake approached the ancient vessel cautiously, weapon ready. The ship's hull was intact, except for what looked like deliberate openings rather than damage from a crash. It didn't crash, Jake realized aloud. Someone landed it here on purpose. He found an entrance that was sized for beings roughly human height. The door had long since corroded away, leaving an opening he could walk through. Jake activated his helmet lights and stepped inside. The interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, filled with technology that defied understanding. Strange devices lined the walls, their purposes unclear. Some areas showed signs of recent activity. Dust patterns disturbed, surfaces wiped clean. Captain, I am detecting trace amounts of breathable atmosphere inside the ship. Life support systems appear to be functioning at minimal levels. Jake moved deeper into the vessel, following a main corridor toward what seemed to be the command center. Along the way, he passed chambers filled with containers and equipment. One room contained thousands of small pods, each one sealed and labeled with those incomprehensible symbols. The command center was a circular chamber dominated by a massive view screen that showed the canyon walls outside. Control panels lined the room, their surfaces covered in the same strange writing. At the center sat a chair designed for a humanoid form. Jake approached the chair cautiously. As he got closer, the ship's systems began to activate. Lights flickered on throughout the command center. The view screen changed to show star charts and navigation data. Arya, are you recording this? Yes, Captain. The technology is unlike anything in human databases. This ship appears to be a survey vessel of some kind, equipped for long-range exploration, and, Captain, I believe this is a seed ship. A what? Like our mission, but far more advanced. This vessel carries the genetic and cultural templates of its creators. Captain, we may have found evidence of an ancient galactic civilization that spread life throughout the stars. Jake stared at the activation displays around him. Humanity thought they were alone in developing interstellar colonization technology. They were wrong. The ship's central computer activated with a sound like distant thunder. Holographic displays filled the air around Jake, showing star maps, biological data, and technological schematics that made human science look primitive by comparison. Arya, can you interface with their systems? Attempting connection now, Captain. There was a pause. Then Arya's voice returned with excitement unusual for an AI. Captain, I have established limited access to their database. The species that built this ship called themselves the Makers. They seeded thousands of worlds with life over a period of 50,000 years. Jake studied the holographic displays. The star charts showed familiar constellations, but with markers indicating planets that had been prepared for development. Earth was among them. Are you saying they created life on Earth? Not created, Captain. Enhanced. The Makers found primitive life on many worlds and guided its evolution toward intelligence. Earth was one of their most successful projects. A new display activated, showing the evolutionary tree of various species. Jake could see the progression from early humans to modern humanity, but there were gaps in the timeline that natural evolution could not explain. They helped us evolve? Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, but not in the way you might think. The Makers did not directly alter human genetics. Instead, they created challenges and opportunities that forced rapid evolution. Climate changes, resource scarcity, competition with other species, all carefully orchestrated to produce intelligence and adaptability. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ancient ship's temperature. They used us as test subjects. In a sense, yes. But Captain, look at the results. Humans developed traits that even the Makers found remarkable. Your capacity for creative problem-solving, your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to cooperate despite individual differences. These were not planned outcomes. They were emergent properties that surprised your creators. More displays showed comparisons between humans and other species the Makers had guided. Most had developed intelligence, but remained limited by their evolutionary origins. Prey species became cautious and indirect. Predator species became aggressive but inflexible. Pack hunters developed strong social bonds, but could not function as individuals. Humans were different. The combination of intelligence, adaptability, and stubborn determination had created something unexpected. The makers called your species the persistent ones, Arya continued. Their records show growing concern about human development. You were advancing too quickly, becoming too unpredictable. What happened to them? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They disappeared approximately 12,000 years ago. Their final records suggest they faced a threat that required them to abandon their seeding programs and retreat to the galactic core. Jake studied the empty command chair. The makers had been gone for millennia, but their ship still functioned. Their technology still worked. They had built things to last. Captain, there is something else. The makers left instructions for species that reached this level of development. They expected some of their subjects to eventually find these seed ships. A new hologram appeared, showing technical specifications that made Jake's head spin. Faster than light. Communication systems, matter conversion technology, defensive systems that could protect entire star systems from invasion. They left us a graduation present, Jake breathed. More than that, they left you the tools to continue their work. The makers believed that species which could find and understand these ships had earned the right to become the next generation of gardeners in the galaxy. Jake looked around the command center with new eyes. This was not just an ancient relic, it was humanity's inheritance. The knowledge contained in this ship could advance human technology by thousands of years. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ancient ship's temperature. They used us as test subjects. In a sense, yes, but Captain, look at the results. Humans developed traits that even the makers found remarkable. Your capacity for creative problem-solving, your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to cooperate despite individual differences. These were not planned outcomes. They were emergent properties that surprised your creators. More displays showed comparisons. Between humans and other species the makers had guided. Most had developed intelligence, but remained limited by their evolutionary origins. Prey species became cautious and indirect. Predator species became aggressive, but inflexible. Pack hunters developed strong social bonds, but could not function as individuals. Humans were different. The combination of intelligence, adaptability, and stubborn determination had created something unexpected. The makers called your species the persistent ones, Arya continued. Their records show growing concern about human development. You were advancing too quickly, becoming too unpredictable. What happened to them? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They disappeared approximately 12,000 years ago. Their final records suggest they faced a threat that required them to abandon their seeding programs and retreat to the galactic core. Jake studied the empty command chair. The makers had been gone for millennia, but their ship still functioned. Their technology still worked. They had built things to last. Captain, there is something else. The makers left instructions for species that reached this level of development. They expected some of their subjects to eventually find these seed ships. A new hologram appeared, showing technical specifications that made Jake's head spin. Faster than light. Communication systems, matter conversion technology, defensive systems that could protect entire star systems from invasion. They left us a graduation present, Jake breathed. More than that, they left you the tools to continue their work. The makers believed that species which could find and understand these ships had earned the right to become the next generation of gardeners in the galaxy. Jake looked around the command center with new eyes. This was not just an ancient relic, it was humanity's inheritance. The knowledge contained in this ship could advance human technology by thousands of years. First, he had to survive long enough to share it. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Arya's voice carried urgent concern. Captain, my sensors detect multiple Vex vessels approaching the canyon. They are not giving up the hunt. Jake ran to the main view screen. 3 Vex attack craft were descending toward the canyon, their weapons already charging for an assault. They had tracked him here, and now they would try to claim the ancient ship for themselves. Arya, can this ship still fight? Defensive systems are operational but limited. Captain, the makers designed this vessel for exploration, not warfare. However, their technology is still far superior to current Vex capabilities. Jake settled into the command chair. The ship's controls responded to his touch as if they had been waiting for him. Tactical displays showed the approaching enemies, and available weapon systems thought the Vex wanted to capture him alive, which meant they would try to disable rather than destroy the ancient ship. That gave Jake an advantage. He had no such limitations. Time to show them what the persistent ones can do, Jake said, his hands moving across alien controls with growing confidence. The ancient ship's weapon systems came online with a deep hum that Jake felt in his bones. Energy readings spiked across the displays as 10,000-year-old technology prepared for battle. The Vex attack craft were fast approaching, but they had no idea what they were facing. Captain, I am integrating with the Maker ship's systems, Arya announced. Their AI is still functional, but dormant. With your permission, I can wake it up. Do it, Jake said, watching the tactical display as the enemy ships entered the canyon. 3 vessels, each one capable of destroying a human cruiser. But they were about to learn why the Makers had ruled the galaxy for 50 millennia. A new voice filled the command center, speaking in perfect English with an accent that seemed familiar yet ancient. Greetings, persistent one. I am Guardian, caretaker of this vessel. It has been a very long time since one of your kind found us. Guardian, we're about to be under attack. Can this ship defend itself? Indeed. The young species that hunts. You has primitive technology. Observe. The main screen showed the Vex ships moving into attack formation. Guardian activated the ancient vessel's shields, and Jake watched the enemy weapons bounce harmlessly off barriers that shimmered like heat waves. Impossible, came a transmission in the clicking Vex language, which Guardian translated automatically. Their shields are stronger than our most powerful weapons. Jake smiled grimly. Guardian, can you communicate with them? Certainly. Opening channel. The lead Vex commander appeared on screen, his gray features twisted with confusion and anger. When he saw Jake in the command chair of the ancient ship, his expression changed to something like fear. Human, the alien said in broken English. You do not understand what you have found. That technology is too dangerous for your primitive species. Funny thing about humans, Jake replied, leaning back in the chair. We have a habit of growing into responsibilities that seem too big for us. Just ask the Makers. Guardian's voice carried amusement. Captain Miller speaks truth, young Vex. Your species was also evaluated by my creators. They found you lacking in the necessary qualities for advancement. The Vex commander's skin flushed darker. We conquered half the galaxy. We are the dominant military force in known space. You conquered through superior technology inherited from others, Guardian replied calmly. You have created nothing new, solved no impossible problems, overcome no seemingly insurmountable challenges. When faced with true adversity, your species retreats or perishes. This is why the Makers deemed you unworthy of their gifts. Jake watched the Vex ships on his tactical display. They were trying to find weaknesses in the ancient vessel's defenses, but their weapons might as well have been throwing rocks. Arya, can you access the Maker database on Vex history? Already done, Captain. The Vex were client species of an empire called the Dominion, which collapsed 3,000 years ago. They inherited advanced technology, but never developed the creativity to improve or maintain it. Their current fleet represents the last functional remnants of Dominion engineering. This explained everything. The Vex were scavengers with stolen technology, desperately searching for new sources of advanced equipment to maintain their fading empire. They had attacked Jake's ship because they detected maker technology in his cargo hold, the genetic and cultural templates that represented humanity's backup plan. Guardian, what was humanity's true mission? Jake asked. To do what the makers could no longer do. To find and awaken sleeping worlds. To guide young species toward their potential. To defend the galaxy against threats that even we feared. Your people carry the templates not just of human civilization, but of the maker legacy itself. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. Humanity had not been sent to the stars just to establish colonies. They had been chosen to become the next makers, the gardeners of galactic civilization. The threat that drove the makers away is returning, Guardian continued. Dark entities from beyond the galactic rim, beings that consume entire star systems. The makers retreated to prepare a final defense, but they knew they might fail. That is why they left these ships and chose successor species to carry on their work. On the tactical display, the Vex ships were retreating. Faced with technology they could not overcome and truths they could not accept, they were falling back to report to their superiors. Jake stood up from the command chair, feeling the weight of destiny on his shoulders. Guardian, can this ship reach other human colonies? Yes, and it can do much more. Captain Miller, you now carry the tools to unite the scattered human settlements and prepare them for what is coming. The galaxy needs the persistent ones to be more than survivors. It needs you to be guardians. Jake looked at Aria's data core, then at the vast star maps surrounding him. Humanity's greatest journey was just beginning.